Hello. Okay, the very first part of this lecture is going over what needs to happen this week. If you were not in class on Friday, which many of you were not, please pick up your commonplace. I have all of these are on this little table in the English department office on the second floor. Pick up your commonplace book. There is a stack of packets right next to it. See, they have these colored top sheets. It's got like this orange colored top sheet. They have different colors. This is your novel tasting packet. Get your novel tasting packet. Everybody who has the same color is going to be in the same group, and you'll end up being in groups of 3. Then get the other packet that's right next to it. There's like a white packet that has like some gray on top of it. Like, so there are 3 things that you need to get if you weren't in class on Friday. This packet has the introduction to the Restoration and the 18th century in it, and it has all of the poems for Monday and Wednesday. And I think maybe some of the other poems too. So get that packet. Read the introduction to the Restoration and 18th century literature. Then on Monday, we do not have physical class because I have to be in Kansas doing an accreditation visit for another institution. We're going to have a Blackboard discussion. That discussion is up. Blue commonplace books. You guys need to put your question into the Blackboard discussion, and then do your commonplace book, but just obviously hold on to it because I can't get to it, and wait and turn it in when you turn it in on the 21st. Ditto for Wednesday. For Wednesday, we have the Swift and Montague poems, and I'm not doing them in a little mini lecture here because I feel like these poems are really self-explanatory, and they're just 2 of them. We're going to have a Blackboard discussion. Again, we don't have physical class. Read commonplace books will be due when we come back on April 23rd. We don't have class on Friday. I have put a revised syllabus up on the Blackboard site. Please check it out. Also, if you like novel tasting, what's novel tasting? That assignment was handed out in class on Friday. I want you guys to have these packets before you go home for Good Friday and Easter, because it's not a lot. It's like 30 to 40-ish pages of reading an 18th century novel. Most groups are groups of 3. You can tell who's in your group by the color of the top sheet. You guys have a little bit of an 18th century novel, and we'll talk about this assignment when we are back in the physical classroom on the 21st, and I will give you time to meet with your group, but you definitely need to get this reading done by the 21st. And then on the 23rd, we'll have novel tastings, and we'll do a thing in class with novel tastings. So if you were not in class on Friday, make sure you pick these up from the English department office. It's very important you get those novel packets before you go on break. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so this is a mini lecture over the poems that we have for Monday. And the first poem, the Rochester poem and the Behn poems. These poems are very sexually explicit and also in conversation with each other. Rochester and Behn knew each other, and um, her poem is definitely responding to the way he describes some of the things in his poem. So this poem is about the imperfect enjoyment and is about a disappointing sexual encounter. And I've put in bold some of the key parts. It's a disappointing, I think I was talking to one of the a student saying like all of these poems are about not being able to get an erection, and I do stand slightly corrected. This poem is about having premature ejaculation. Um, so the speaker uh, has a premature ejaculation, and then in response to his partner writes, question, is there then no more? Um, he is not able to get an erection again, right? He talks about being impotent. And then he kind of he gets starts to get frustrated and angry at his body, at his what he refers to as dart of love, his penis. Note he's pretty frank about his bisexuality. Rochester's poetry is very open about his bisexuality. Bisexuality is not a word that existed at this time, but that doesn't mean that there aren't people who enjoy having sex with um, all kinds of people. So then this last little stanza, it's not really a little stanza, this last little section, he addresses his penis directly. Thou treacherous base deserter of my flame, right? That he is talking to his penis. And this whole last section is him basically criticizing his penis, which he calls the worst part of me and henceforth hated most. And we end with um, couplet. Actually, this is all rhymed couplets. Um, where may 10,000 abler pricks agree to do the wronged Corinna right for thee. So there'll be 10,000 other better penises, right, who will be able to satisfy this woman. This woman is given Corinna, right? This is one of these stock character names. So the imperfect enjoyment, a poem about a disappointing sexual encounter. This poem, Disabled Debauchee, which we are not in rhymed couplets. This is ABAB. Very, very simple and rhymed stanzas, regular stanzas. It was a long, extended, almost a conceit like a metaphysical poem. He compares his situation as to that of an admiral who can't directly fight in war, but kind of looks on from the sidelines and observes war. And again, we have this idea of impotence. Well, I'm by pox. He's not talking about smallpox. People often refer to syphilis as the pox. So basically, having a sexually transmitted disease, and wine, alcohol, notoriously not stimulating sexual encounters, right? When these two things, which Rochester definitely experienced in his life, he was an alcoholic, he was drunk for 5 years straight. He also had a sexually transmitted disease from his incredibly wide array of sexual encounters. But so he's talked about when I'm impotent, this is how I'm going to act, and then but he also talks about how other people should act. And I have bolded the whole um, stanza where he again talks to a stereotypically named lover, Chloris in this case, about basically, I think the word is like kind of like a three-way, right? Which one of them will have sex with the link boy. Um, and again, right, like the poem ends with this idea of because I can't do anything because I'm impotent, and because I'm good for nothing else, I'll be wise. But so it's interesting. Think about how impotence is represented in this poem as opposed to the earlier poem. This poem, the next poem, Song, I included uh, because it's a little bit different in that he's not regretting not being able to have sex. He more sees sex, or we might say passion or love, as kind of stupid. Um, and that he likes, right, other things, right? Witty conversation, um, right? Health, wealth, mirth, and wine. But he also, again, this poem is also pretty explicitly about uh, a wide array of sexual encounters. So you can see from these poems why Rochester was called the wickedest man in England. Um, his, his life was crazy. I really encourage you to read the little biographical entry about him. He led a fascinating life and died basically of alcoholism when he was 33. So we have two poems here by Aphra Behn, which we read her novel, Orinoco. The first poem, To the Fair Clorinda, subtitle, Who Made Love to Me, Imagined More Than Woman. This poem can be a little bit tricky. This poem is either, and there are two interpretations of this poem. The first is that Ben is discussing a same sex attraction to another woman, a woman who may, sorry, have some kind of masculine qualities, or maybe she appears a little bit more masculine than feminine. Um, Maybe she's not presenting right like her gender stereotypically. So that's one interpretation. Another interpretation is that the speaker is very clearly female of the poem, um, is expressing an attraction to what in Ben's time they would have called a hermaphrodite. We do not use that word today. We would say intersex, or potentially a person today that we might say is transgender, which is also definitely a word that they didn't have in the 1680s. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a representation here or a depiction of um, a person who is attracted either to a person of the same sex or to a person who exhibits characteristics of both sexes. So, but that subtitle, Imagined More Than Woman, opens up the door that maybe this is a fantasy as well, that I am imagining the fair Clorinda. Right, and I have bolded parts of the poem that open these things up, right? That either the fair Clorinda should be called a maid, young woman, or youth. Youth usually does have the connotation of a man, but it's a little bit ambiguous. Um, I also put in bold these lines, right? We might love and yet be innocent, for sure no crime with thee we can commit. Now, this is kind of tending towards the Clorinda is a woman. They could love each other, and because right they can't have penetrative sex, there's no crime. Although, right, the next three lines do raise this question of maybe Clorinda has a penis, right? The snake lies hid beneath the fragrant leaves, right? Like the maybe there's a hidden snake here. And the last section um really complicates the poem. Chloris is a stereotypical female name. Alexis is kind of the male name. So soft chloris with dear Alexis joins. Right. Is this person have characteristics of both sexes? And then the last line obviously has this allusion to being a hermaphrodite with the like Hermes and Aphrodite, which is how that word gets constructed. So there's a lot to think about here, but I want you to think about how does behn represent uh, same-sex orientation. Perhaps it's more complicated than that. And then think about how Rochester also presents his like what we would call today bisexuality. Behn was married. She was married to a man. That doesn't necessarily mean anything, at these times. But we definitely might also see her as potentially bisexual. Um, so, but is there a difference between like the way behn portrays this or the way Rochester talks about these things? So there's lots of things to think about. And then also the last poem by behn is very long and it's called The Disappointment. And again, we have our stock lover characters, in this case, Lysander and Chloris. And Lysander surprises Chloris in a thicket. They're basically both kind of like shepherds of some kind. Um, there are two interpretations of this poem as well. It says, resistance is too late to show. She whispers softly in his, now she does, right? It does say in stanza 2, she puts his hands on her chest, but she doesn't push him away. She brings him closer. But in stanza 3, she says, right, cease your vain desire, or I will call out. I must, she says, like, I must not give you, I gave you the, right, I gave you my heart, right, like, don't take this. Or she says, or take my life. So she's basically saying, please don't have sex with me. Instead, like, kill me. But right then, like, right, he does not desist. Instead, he continues to kiss her. Then she kind of, we might say, faints. Later this is referred to as a trance, or we might see her as unconscious. That, right, she's described as half dead and breathless. Um so, and then he kind of like gazes upon her, and this is all described in incredibly like erotic and terms. But he is unable to perform the sacrifice. And then we get like he gets frustrated, he throws himself on her, but it's kind of like the gods have snatched, right, they leave him the desire, but they take away his ability to act on it. And I believe he tries to self-stimulate in section 9, but he can't, and he just gets frustrated. Chloris kind of comes back to consciousness. In stanza 11, she like puts her like tiny little hand and then kind of recoils in horror from touching Lysander on his penis, because it is small, or is it described as a withered flower, or that might be Rochester. Then she flees from Lysander's arms and runs away. Now, interestingly, she's compared to Daphne. Daphne is running from Apollo. She's running from a rape. And so she runs away. But the question is she running away from a potential rape like Daphne, or is she running away in horror at Lysander's less than impressive performance? Stanza 4 leaves it up to the reader, right? The nymph's resentments none but I can well imagine and condole, but none can guess Lysander's soul. And then, like we see, like how does Lysander? We kind of step back in stanza 14, um, and again, but we get multiple poems about impotence here. We get poems from impotence about Rochester. We get poems of impotence about behn. Is there a difference in the way that they portray these things? So lots of questions, lots of things to think about. Please comment profusely on the Blackboard discussion. Thank you.